welcome to another episode of Mikey's Video Game Madness. Today we're playing New Ghostbusters 2 again for the NES. This is the NTSC version. This is the version that was unreleased in North America. You might have seen me play the Japanese version, which plays much like the North American version. You can see you can also play as Winston and actual Lewis in this game. And they all have like unique characteristics. This is one of the few games where the characters, though chibi, they actually look like the actors a little bit. I didn't see that until Ghostbusters 2 on the Sega Genesis. Of course, I saw like maybe things like that and the character profiles or whatever. There's a PC version of Ghostbusters 2, not like on DOS, because that was their own game made by Sierra and Dynamics, which was kind of cool. It had cool aspects to it, like the Ghostbusting. But anyway, so there was a Japanese version, obviously that was in Japanese, and then there was a European version that was PAL, so the music was a little bit slower, the gameplay was a little bit slower, so it was a little bit off. Activision had an exclusive contract, I guess, here to release games, games based on Ghostbusters, like only on console. Like if another company wanted to do it, they were not able to do it because Activision like signed some sort of contract. So when HAL Laboratory, which is a really cool company, they're actually the ones that currently make the Kirby's Dream Land games, and I believe they were the company that started making Super Smash Brothers, if I'm not mistaken. I know that Namco then took over, but I believe it was originally like a HAL Laboratory property. So it's kind of cool to think that one of my favorite 2D Nintendo platformers actually made one of the best console Ghostbusters 2 games ever made. Probably one of the best console Ghostbusters games, period, even if you hold it up to newer games. I certainly would say it's more fun than even the last Ghostbusters game to come out, just because, I don't know, this one has charm and stuff. Not that that game doesn't, but it's just like a multiplayer game, and at its essence it feels somewhat like other multiplayer games, even though there are creative aspects where this is kind of a cool concept. It's not like get from point A to point B, it's more to the theme of Ghostbusters. There's like, the Game Boy actually shows you how many numbers that you have, because there's a Game Boy port of this that actually came out. It's a little bit different, but kind of the same. But in that one, they would tell you how many ghosts are left, and you kind of had to find them. Where the levels in this seem a little bit bigger, and it actually guides you where to go. So we knew about the Game Boy one. There used to be this old website. It looked like it was actually, whoever wrote it actually wrote it in like HTML like format, or they used like some website program that was pretty primitive. Like the color scheme was like black, purple, green, and red. Some parts, at least for me, were like really hard to read. So they covered like Ghostbusters games, they covered European ports of games, so I never understood why this one kept flying over their radar, because I would see in the comments section that people would recall like a NES version, like it was canceled or something, like maybe they saw it in the kiosk, but those were people talking about playing it in the States. I'm surprised, because this seems to be fairly well known for the countries that it came out in, so the fact that it was like this rumor, I'm surprised nobody like corrected it. And then one day I just saw it randomly like pop up on YouTube, and I'm like, what, this game is real? And then I played it, and I loved the Game Boy game. That was like one of my go-to Game Boy games. And then I played this like years after. Like, I think the first time I played this I was like 18 years old. To give you an idea, like in 1992, I think this game might have came out, which is super late in the NES's life cycle. Like the Super Nintendo was already out then. Didn't that come out in 91 or 90? I guess it depends whether Japan or North America. I get those release dates messed up. So yeah, so I don't know exactly when this was a release, but I know like a lot of those last gen NES games that were really good in Japan didn't get released here, because by the time they were localized It's like, what's the point? Everybody's playing 16-bit consoles, are investing in it and selling their NES stuff. Like, people weren't huge collectors back then. Like, if people said they collect games, that would be like a very obscure, nerdy habit, or just having like games in general. Most people that you go over the house might have like this old dusty system that might have played like 5 games or whatever, and then the people that are actually into gaming would just like constantly like upgrade. And of course you have people like me who kept shit forever, but that wasn't terribly common. Usually most people, when the newest thing came out, it like that's, you just got that and you got rid of your other systems. And I just never was like that, because I always loved my games until I was desperate as a teen and they started having things like EB Games and Funko Land. Just to comment on the Scolari Brothers fight that you saw there, that worked way better than any version except the DOS version. The DOS actually had this third-person camera angle where you actually aim the reticle with the mouse, and actually it almost worked like a third-person shooter really early on, and you would like aim and shoot the ghosts and then try to pull them into the trap. The mechanic is actually somewhat similar to the 2009 Ghostbusters, or even the last Ghostbusters game that came out, where you kind of reel them into the funnel of the trap. So that's pretty ahead of its time. I can't say the rest of the DOS game is really all that great, which is unfortunate. Something that Ghostbusters games seem to mess up on often, this one does too. There's no Ecto 1A. Ghostbusters 2 has the Ecto 1A. Ghostbusters, the first Ghostbusters film is Ecto 1, and then Ghostbusters Afterlife's Ecto 1. And if you look at the license plate in the 2009 game, it actually says Ecto 1B. So apparently, if you consider the game canon, they like upgraded it and then like went back to normal, but I don't think the game's canon anymore. So I'm curious like what they're actually doing in the next movie. There hasn't been trailers or anything, they've just made like little announcements, but it sounds like it's gonna be a pretty cool movie. At least I hope it is. Just like, it's not looking good, but I really hope Indiana Jones is gonna be awesome. But anyway, so yeah, this game was a rumor. I found it and out about it, and I fell in love with it. One cool another tidbit about this game is it's one of the first times I ever heard like chiptune music of like the pop music in the game. This isn't the soundtrack, like the orchestrated soundtrack from the game. This is actually the licensed music that they had, like Bobby Brown, Danny Elfman, I believe there is like Elton John. I forgot who sings Flipside. I think that's what this is. Like, if you ever watched the part in Ghostbusters 2 where you see the city being taken over towards the end, this is actually the song that it plays during that part. So that's really cool. Like, I've never really heard licensed music beside like, I remember in the version that we got, when you played as a Statue of Liberty, it played like this crappy version of like Higher and Higher, but it wasn't the same. And I love the little cutscenes that this game has. So yeah, this one is really accurate to the game. It doesn't play like an action game. You're kind of going through the paces, just eliminating ghosts. Obviously, they were not this well equipped in any section during the River of Slime. This film came out in 1989. I feel like it's safe to talk about at this point, especially since I'm not going into detail. A lot of people shit on Ghostbusters 2. I personally like Ghostbusters 2 a lot, and nostalgia plays a huge part in that. I originally watched Ghostbusters, I've talked about this a million times, but I think I saw the cartoon series first. It's kind of fuzzy, and then I accumulated some of the toys, and when I watched the episodes, I'd line up the toys and kind of like role play, even though like for some reason the toy line besides Slimer like never incorporated ghosts from the show. They had the Marshmallow Man as well. I think everything else was like just made up for the toy line, so it was kind of frustrating when you watch this You can see the decapitated heads right now that were on pikes at one scene that was really dark for a movie that's usually considered the most light-hearted affair. I feel like even though Ghostbusters 2 is more light-hearted, I feel like some of the visuals are much darker than the original film, and I find that super ironic. Like, the river of slime is such an interesting concept, like emotions turning into like that psychomagnetheric, as they phrase it, where it's like active to emotion, so emotions get concentrated and turn into this viscous substance. In this universe, negativity turns into slime, and then I guess positivity can do it too, but for the sake of story, because people are so shitty. And I guess it was because of what was going on during the time too. It kind of reflected, I don't want to get in the history. Feel free to look up 1989, because that's like a whole another discussion in the early 90s and stuff like that. So, yeah, a huge focus was on like negativity and like it turning into like the sludge and stuff like that. So that was a really cool concept. And it was like, I loved Ghostbusters, like the cartoon, like I said, and then my dad, who was electric repairman, I cut a huge section of this level out just because it would just make the video drag. It's like a series of buildings. There's not like a true boss fight. It's basically like climbing a skyscraper. This is Peter Venkman's apartment, if you couldn't tell. It follows the story, at least the segments in the story, fairly closely, and I really appreciate that. So you'll just see them go into a room, fight a few things, and get to the end of the level. But keep in mind, I'm like cutting some of this short for time purposes. So when I was a kid growing up, roughly around, I guess I would say like 5, that would be in 89, I didn't go to the theaters that much. I think the few theater experiences that I have that I can remember at that time was probably like Bambi. I don't know. I remember being super sensitive as a kid. I remember when I went to go see Ghostbusters 2, the Batman 1989 trailer, even though I loved that movie, like it's one of my favorite movies to this day, I remember the trailer scaring me just because it being on the big screen and not being exposed to that much noise and visuals. At first, it kind of scared me. My grandparents used to take me to the IMAX, which would be an incredible treat, like if I went today. But when I was a kid, I was terrified because I thought the shit would come out of the screen, and it was like so loud. Like there's this part where they like test the screen and like I don't know if they have like lasers or something, because it also doubled as like a planetarium and stuff like that. They could like show the stars. I think they use lasers. Whatever they use, they could get the light so bright it looked like it was coming right at you, and with that sound system. And this isn't like the IMAX that you see like at the regular movie theater, because like this is like a dome. So in order to see like the whole screen, which is bad for regular movies, that's why they have like the more narrow ones that you're used to, you literally have to look to your left and somewhat behind you if you see the full radius of the screen. It would wrap around you and over you, so when that train was coming, it would scare the shit out of you. So those are like my theater going experiences. And I forgot what show we were watching, and I didn't go to the theater, so I didn't see posters, I didn't see trailers or anything. So we were watching some show, and I just remember seeing the Ghostbusters pop up. And at the time, I finally saw the movie, because my dad showed me the movie when he thought, I guess, I was old enough, so I guess like 3. So the beginning part with the library scared the crap out of me. I was like terrified during a good portion of that movie, but I don't know, like I was a dumb kid. Like my terror turned into like a weird fascination. Like I always kind of liked Ghostbusters because they could fight the unknown. I think that's why it appealed to kids too, because like they were like these regular like dudes that are really smart, and they use their intelligence to build like all this stuff and fight these supernatural things, like all these things that like kids are typically afraid of. So anyway, so I lined my toys up, and like I've said in previous videos, like the Marshmallow Man wasn't a good guy like in the cartoon. So usually what happens, the bad guys at the end of the movies happen to the Marshmallow Man, and it made me cry. My parents had to console me. I used to sleep with my Marshmallow Man toy like a teddy bear. My parents had to get me, or I think my grandmother did it, like a stuffed Slimer, because they were scared that I was gonna like poke my eyes out, because it was like this stiff plastic action figure with his arms sticking out, so that could clearly like poke you in the eye in the middle of the night. So I had that, and I had like a Ernie puppet too. I don't know why they used to get me puppets instead of stuffed animals. I think the next one was Fraggle Rock. It was originally Fievel from American Tail, because I loved that movie back in the day, but it like read like stories to you like Teddy Ruxpin, where you put the cassette tape in and you have the accompanying book that goes with it, and he would like read you the story. But my dad, in his infinite wisdom, like basically made it tell me to go into the corner and go in timeout, and my grandmother's so pissed because she actually had to take it back to the store and trade it in for a Fraggle Rock doll. But that was kind of hard because I didn't know what it was from, because I didn't get HBO at the time, so my grandmother taped episodes of Fraggle Rock. I also remember renting Fraggle Rock a lot from the video store. I think that's actually where I first saw it, so I was somewhat familiar with it. But like back then, we didn't have cable. We had cable like for a very, very brief amount of time. Like I feel like maybe like a few months or so, and then we got rid of it. Maybe it was a trial thing or whatever. So like most of the cable stuff or movies I saw were because my grandmother taped them on VHS. So yeah, after I became not afraid of watching Ghostbusters, I ended up like watching the film so much my parents confiscated it from me for a bit, because they were tired of having Ghostbusters on every time that they came home. They're like, don't you have anything new to watch? So they like hid it for a while until I could watch other things. But yeah, it was kind of cool how I remember lining up my toys and like acting out everything, even though they weren't the same monsters. This level is so frustrating because there's no 8-way movement, and the slime is making you go in all these different directions, as you can see the different currents. And I was really tired when I recorded this. I just wasn't having it. I just wanted to get to the museum, which I unfortunately did not get to do in this video. I apologize for that, but you know, I tried my best. I did get to the museum one time back in the day. I don't think I used the NES controller though. I think since I was using like a ROM, and I don't even think it was the NTSC. I know I've posted the NTSC ROM before, but I've just never been happy with any of my videos covering this game. I probably won't be happy with this one and want to revisit it. Plus it'll give me an excuse to play it again. Today's extraordinarily stressful, so I don't know how good this commentary is. Like I literally had to close my door. Like the animals were meowing and everything. The dog was trying to get in the door. Like it's like, oh my god, I don't remember. I guess because I haven't been recording as frequently like this. Usually I've been live streaming. They're not used to me like talking on a microphone, so it confuses them. So it's so hard to get like any kind of quiet without something going on, especially like since I live in an apartment. Like I swear Slimer is like the worst enemy in this entire game. Like he's the most harmless ghost in any version of Ghostbusters, but I swear, like out of all the enemies, I feel like Slimer gets me the most by throwing all that shit at me. So one thing I do think that's kind of cool about the bosses in here, they don't really have a life bar. You actually just like bust them long enough until they get weak, and then you suck them with the trap, and that's awesome. I love how that works. That's realistic to the movie. Also like how you actually have a trapper and a buster. That's authentic to the movie. One good thing that wasn't in the Game Boy game, your trapper doesn't get hurt, so only being able to move 4 ways and trying to dodge everything, like it's good that you don't have to worry about your partner. If you don't want to download this game, because you'd have to download it unless you get like a repro cart, and really isn't that the same thing if it's not like officially licensed. But there is an official US Game Boy game version. If you live in Europe or Japan, obviously you've already played this game to death. But for like people in North America, this game is kind of a novelty, because until like 2009 we didn't get a ton of good Ghostbusters games. Like usually the only ones we would reference is like the Commodore 64 Ghostbusters game, the Sega Master System one, which was just a more advanced port of that game and way better than the NES port, which should have been way more advanced than the Commodore 64 port. But it was really early. I don't know what they were thinking. If you look at a lot of NES games, they don't look like what was released later on the system, so maybe it was just an early game, but I don't even think it was like a launch title. It wasn't like a black box game. I mean, technically the box is black, but when I say black box game, I mean like the one that says, it'll have like a Venture series, it'll tell you like the genre and stuff, you know, your classic Nintendo look, where like how your copy of Duck Hunt and Super Mario Brothers looked, and a lot of times they would show the graphics as pixels instead of like actually having box art. I don't know what those creepy tree things are, but I think they kind of look cool. I think because this game is very chibi and very Japanese, they put some Japanese folklore things in it, which I think kind of give the game character. I don't know. I don't remember exactly how you beat this boss. I don't know if you just keep on destroying the guys or there's a trick. I just can't remember. It's been a while, but I was really glad to revisit this game, and I can't recommend it enough. This and A Nightmare on Elm Street are videos I never feel like I do justice, so I'm gonna watch this video and feel like I can do 25 different things, especially since I was stressed with the animals and I'm like far reaching, because I already started recording this before, so I almost had a whole commentary recorded before I had to stop and basically say the same shit over again. But hopefully it'll be charming on this channel. Like if you love Ghostbusters or Ghostbusters 2, I mean, I feel like unless you're like a film person that just likes films alone and you're not a fan of Ghostbusters, maybe you don't like Ghostbusters 2, like, I don't know. I think people who just base it on the comedic merits instead of the whole theme, the concept and stuff like that, and kids that grew up with it look at the original Ghostbusters differently, where to kids Ghostbusters 2 was like, it was like a combination of like almost like the vibe of the cartoon, which actually had some really good dark episodes. And then with the 1984 movie, they actually referenced the 1984 movie in the cartoon, like the movie was based on the cartoon. But anyway, this is New Ghostbusters 2 for the NES by HAL Laboratory. It's one of my favorite NES games that I played in quite some time that I didn't discover until much later. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all doing well. Take care. Bye.
Thanks for watching!